Where banks are silent, we speak. A podcast by You Mushroom.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast, What Your Bank Doesn't Tell You. Today, we have a very special topic, a very sad topic as well. We are talking about the cost of wars.
Hello, everyone. Also from my side, indeed, a very, very hot topic. Unfortunately, part of our everyday life and reality, and we cannot open a newspaper without reading that there is an armed conflict somewhere and there are new budget expenditures for military purposes. And yes, we are back again to the times where there was an arms competition between the countries. Welcome back to the 70s and 80s.
Back to the Cold War. But then again, we got so many requests about how these wars impact the financial markets and investments into defense companies. At the beginning of the year, we have seen a big rise in the prices of these companies. So this was the reason why we thought, okay, we really have to dig through the figures and material and to get a proper overview about the cost of the war or the wars and who is bearing these costs and who is profiting. And I can promise you we have some very revealing details for you.
Indeed. And what we're going to start with is about the dimensions of the costs which we have, because we wonder, when we talk about war costs or costs around armed conflict, what type of costs actually are incurred? Obviously are the military spending, right, which is a no-brainer, but then we have medical spending, we have reconstruction spending, we have increased debt and obviously the interest on it, and we obviously also have loss of productivity and capital flights, and not to mention the whole emotional costs around the war.
Exactly. I mean, these are all kind of items on a
budget.
On a budget, yes. But we might forget very often that behind each budget item, there is a tragedy for people and the environment. And only if we count the military personnel who suffers during a war, it's also private individuals get killed. Then we have the replacements, the forced replacements, the refugees. Then we have the infrastructure, which is erased in many cases, and we have the environmental damages, and very often we forget about that a war is one of the biggest environmental catastrophes what we have seen these days. And you can go on. I mean, the list of real costs for people experiencing is tremendous.
Absolutely. And one of the major impacts which we seem to have forgotten after the Second World War here in Europe is the emotional costs of war and the traumas which arise around that, the fact that people are automatically prohibited of living a happy life until they really recover, and it can take ages. Well, there is one industry which we can already claim profiting from that, and that is the medical industry, the pharma, in a very sad consequences though.
And now you can argue, okay, wars are exemptions. But then again, I mean, very often we are not aware how many wars are actually running. And on a global scale, we have 59 armed conflicts where nations are involved. And there are another 60 plus conflicts where nations are not officially involved. So it's more kind of the guerrillas. But still, I mean, we have almost 60 wars where governments are involved.
That's
crazy. A huge number, no?
This is 1/3 of actually the number of countries worldwide. And we also have statistics that say that 78 countries are actually engaging conflicts beyond their borders. This is almost half of the number of countries, a little bit less than half of the number of countries worldwide. And needless to say, one of the countries most involved in those conflicts is the United States.
Yeah, and also for me, this changes the entire picture of wars which I had previously, or maybe many people still have. And for me, a war was always you defend your country. But in many cases, I mean, you mentioned the number of 78 countries involved in conflicts beyond their border. This is not defense. This is active engagement somehow. And this was also described in a very nice paper of the Global Peace Index, that many wealthy countries, they use armed conflicts in order to play their power.
It is definitely one of the most pronounced ways to demonstrate power, and we see it currently with what's happening politically, with the conference in China, where actually the Chinese president is collecting 26 global leaders to kind of create and demonstrate a counterpower balance on the other side of the world against the U.S. dominance. And but what is really very tragic is that also a lot of innovation and a lot of innovative companies are connected to war, because one of the fields where effectively new technology is immediately tested is in the context of the military industry.
Yes, and we had this discussion a few days or weeks ago, or already months ago. I mean, you are a big fan of the tech companies. You love these developments on the AI side,
but they are, most of them, Palantir, Nvidia, and all the big ones. They do work with the governments, and Nvidia has a lot of contracts with multiple governments. Whether everything is set for peace is a questionable, and you see, this is where technology is neutral, but side bracket, but it depends in which hands does it get into, and what is it used for.
So, and the governments, again, they profit from the information which is generated by these companies, and as we know, the more information, the easier it's kind of getting the overhand in a conflict.
We were talking about the technology and the artificial intelligence industry, but this is only one little aspect. If we look at it globally across industry and across countries, the total spendings for 2024 linked to some form of a violence, some form of a military conflict, are $20 trillion in purchasing powers parity terms. And this is scary. This is 20 with 12 zeros behind it.
So these figures are really shocking, but they are even more shocking if you consider them on a per capita level. So this means for every person, $2,500 are paid for armed conflicts. And this is a lot. And if we go a level deeper and only consider the military spending, we are still at $1,200 per person. So
this is
you
crazy.
can imagine, I mean, with $1,200, I mean, that's the holiday budget. It's a generous holiday budget for so many families, and it just goes away.
This is incredible. This is really scary. And actually, the real military spendings alone, they are $9 trillion, again, in the same terms as before. And if you look at $9 trillion, this is actually twice the GDP of Germany.
Yes.
This is crazy. And it is 9 times the GDP of Switzerland.
Yes. To put it into perspective, it's really shocking.
Absolutely.
So there would be required 9 Switzerland, the productivity of 9 Switzerland.
Yes, to finance that. Yes.
The conflict. So this is enormous.
Absolutely. And what is really very scary is the fact that we talk about humanitarian crisis, hunger, a lot of drama which is going around with population which lives below the poverty, the absolute threshold of poverty. But when we see, on the other hand, what money goes into armed conflicts, I think with only piece of it, we could have easily solved the humanitarian crisis in the world.
Solved so many issues on this planet. And you see it, I mean, all these conflicts, the money, it's really a big topic. And in our podcast, it's not possible that we cover all the topics. So we picked out Ukraine, given it's the conflict just in front of our doors. It's one of the larger conflicts as well. And we really try to follow the money where all these expenditures and costs are really going and who is financing it. So in the case of Ukraine, we have physical damage of infrastructure of about $520 billion. Again, a huge number. About 50 billion, again, I mean, 1/5 of the previous number, but still a very large number, is due to environmental damages. So because of pollution is getting into rivers, etc., and this needs to be cleaned at some point, etc. And then the military support is again $250 billion. And if you count all these costs together, and if you consider as well spillover costs or costs which occur in other countries involved in the conflicts, then you come to a staggering figure of $2.4 trillion total costs of the Ukraine war.
This is incredible. This is really absolutely scary. And Then, of course, the question is who is paying actually the military support for Ukraine, donors or Ukraine itself? So basically, grants of donors do not need to be paid back as a general rule of thumb. But deals around that might be struck, and there is always a hook. That's never gratis, as a matter of fact. We know that.
There is no free lunch, no.
Not at all. And it actually comes with interest on top of it. And interesting in this context is actually the impact for the USA. They are basically paying $183 billion, which is approximately a little bit less than 1% of the GDP, or again, $540 per US person, or approximately, again, $2,000 per family. This is really scary. Actually, war is financed by each and every one of us through our tax donations.
It's either paid by the tax payments, and in the US, the median tax bill is 4.6 thousand. So 4,600 in other words. So half of the tax bill
goes for war.
Goes to Ukraine.
It's incredible. This is really, really incredible.
And then, of course, you also have the increased debt of the US government. Then interest needs to be paid on this debt. So it's also the future generations which are basically paying for the current conflicts.
So scarily, we have some very few who profit, and we're going to come back to that. But the costs are effectively distributed to each and every one of us. We paid financially, and obviously the population of the nations which are involved in conflict are paying it with their lives, emotionally, with loss of families, members, of housing, of normal life and peace of mind. So tremendous catastrophe around that.
And as you say, it's not just the US, it's basically many developed countries involved in this conflict. So it's not just the US taxpayer paying for
Absolutely.
it, it's all of us in the end.
Exactly, it's Europe, it's we here, and yes.
And you know, very often I was questioning whether Ukraine needs to pay back. And for me, it was also kind of surprising. And yes, you mentioned the deals, nothing comes for free. But the Ukraine, the vast amount of money they don't have to pay back. They couldn't do it because their productivity is by far too small to finance the conflict. So it really ends up with the countries of the donors.
Yes, and another side note, by the way, Ukraine used to be considered the corn camera of Europe and of Africa. What that is going to have as an impact on the hunger, but that's a topic for itself, just on a side note. If we want to continue with respect to the facts and figures, which are really scary, we know that US debt is skyrocketing, and among others, this is one of the drivers of US debt. Also, we covered the topic about the taxpayers, but let us see how the money flows and what are the main streams.
Where are going all these trillions? No?
Exactly. Where does that go?
So, I mean, given the biggest part, at least for what is paid at this point in time, I mean, the rebuilding of the infrastructure will come at a later point. But at the moment, the money goes really into defense, into military spending. And here, there are basically two major ways. So one way is that the governments, in our case now, we are looking at the US, they are drawing their stockpiles of war equipment. And then the other part is more kind of the planning or the forward-looking, is basically getting into contracts with defense companies in order to fulfill the needs of the conflict.
It's incredible, really incredible. And then we have deliveries through NATO, and obviously we also have different administration and control mechanisms around all those type of supplies, and it's actually immense. It's like a balloon which permanently expands and is really scary. But then for me a big question is also, and we discussed that a lot, is who does profit from that? Mm-hmm. And obviously the obvious answer is the defense industry. So let's deep dive into that one.
Yes, I mean, we mentioned before that it's basically the stockpiles and the contracts with the defense companies. So there are different programs where these contracts are given. And And the major profiteers of these contracts are the usual names. It's Lockheed Martin, RTX, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics. And
or military companies.
for the major, of course there are more, but these are the major profiteers of these conflicts, considering the US. I'm sure if we consider NATO and Europe, then other companies might be
Of course.
the best profiteers. So, and looking a level deeper, who is owning these companies? So again, we end up with 4 companies, and the biggest owners, and in combination, these 4 companies, they own 35% roughly of all these defense companies. It's State Street, it's Vanguard, it's BlackRock, and it's Capital Research.
Asset managers.
So basically the largest asset managers. Now you can argue, yeah, but they are selling funds and you have the individual investors into these funds. Yes, this is true. Economically, we all profit when we are invested. But then again, the voting rights, they remain with the asset manager. And with the voting rights, so if you represent a big voting group, then usually you also are eligible for a board membership. And you can have, or you have your ways to have the influence.
This is incredible. So basically, again, the power ultimately gets concentrated in some few hands, and the costs are spread across each and every one of us. This is really, really scary.
And it's very interesting. If you look at who is in the management of these companies,
Yeah.
they meet again in the same organization, and very surprisingly, some of these names, they appear again on the donors list or on advisory list of conflicting countries. So it seems that it's kind of a mingling almost.
Yeah. It's a one little group of people who are also the World Economic Forum, Institute of International Finance, Council of Foreign Relationships. I mean, you actually have really the idea that there are some few who really control what's happening in the world seem not to be so far away from reality. If we look at the numbers and the figures, and those are all publicly available numbers, that's the scary part of it.
Oh, yes, I mean...
There's nothing hidden.
No. I mean, we did all our research with public sources, of course, and it's just a matter of taking the time of connecting the dots.
Exactly.
And I had so many question marks in respect to costs and money flows in respect to a war, and for me this was really revealing
It's
and also
eye-opening.
mind-boggling.
Yes.
So, long story short, just to summarize what it means, it's basically, I mean, and you mentioned it before, a small group of people over proportionally profit from global conflicts. And the costs are bared by
We finance that. Every one of us finance it.
It's the human disaster, it's the natural disaster bared by people living in the conflicting areas. It's the effective costs or dollar costs, which all of us are paying. And yes, a small group is profiting. It almost sounds like a redistribution of money.
It is a redistribution of money, and it's a redistribution of money across within the current active generation, but also between our generations and the future generations. And what is even more tragic is a huge redistribution of money also with respect to where money is needed. I mean, we are financing war as opposed to solving real conflicts with respect to hunger, with respect to medical supply, educational supply, etc., etc. With this money, we could really build a paradise on earth. But there is one major problem. War is a very profitable business still. I think we should work towards direction to make peace a very profitable business. And that is a very good way how we can really reduce the military conflicts. As long as war is such a profitable business and is a playground for, testing new technologies, really getting the biggest profit margins are in industry related to armed conflicts. As long as that's the case, there is a natural skewness of people who are economically driven to go invest into this industry, to get engaged into this industry and industries, etc. So there is something substantially wrong in our system.
I see how engaged you are getting when we are talking about how can we support peace on Earth. And this is one of the major drivers as well why we founded You Mushroom, because
Absolutely.
for us it's really a key element to give the know-how, the knowledge to all the people to invest, to build their own wealth, to have a saying when it comes to global politics and really changing the world in the end.
And to be incredibly mindful where they give their money. This is the essential, and we'll come back to that. We get a lot of under the point of ESG, we particularly are very critical when it comes to ESG. But when it comes to really being mindful where to invest personally, there is a lot what we can do. And the first thing, as you say, starts with us being responsible for our money. And we do keep saying always that we are very humanitarian-driven company and that we have humanitarian missions. The fact that human life is not equally valued everywhere. Our mission is to really contribute to equalizing human value everywhere. It should be parity, which it should not be a question. One way to do that is to make aware of what is happening in the world. A critical view, a view of the beaten track. And normally newspapers want us to believe one thing, want us to read one thing. But as we mentioned, those facts and figures, they're public. It's just how we connect them and what conclusions do we draw out of it. A person who reads that may read the conclusion, let's invest in Lockheed Martin. Legal, absolutely legitimate way of thinking. The conclusion which we want to drive is, please get educated what's happening with your money and where are you paying taxes.
And invest. I mean, you can generally invest as long as we have these big companies thriving and as long as the money printing machine is rolling, then you can basically just be invested. And this is one of the important things. And we always say that the very rich, they are always invested. Most of the people are not. And this is basically what we also do from our end. There are many companies we don't want to be invested in, but then we are invested in general to profit from these bigger dynamics. And one point I also want to come back, you mentioned ESG before. And we have the EU regulation and we have these requirements in respect to ESG. But then again, the very same people, they support the war, which is a ESG disaster in any aspect. So it's a bit hypocritical. And I think when we invest, we always have to question ourselves, where do we want our money to go? And this is most or best ESG.
I agree. This is the pure ESG form, and you've summed it up perfectly. I think we are at the end of our podcast, and we would love to trigger you and inspire you to think deeper about all those important topics, not just to swap over the next headline and say, oh, just another war or more of the same. We get used to it as humans. Even the stock markets stopped reacting to conflicts compared to 20, 30 years ago. Please write us any questions and topics which you would love to have covered. Your thoughts and feelings about all those very highly emotional, highly political, highly sensitive topics. We are here to answer them, and we are very much looking forward to welcome you again back to our podcast.
Thank you very much also from my side.
Where banks are silent, we speak. A podcast by You Mushroom.